Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate and CIBC, and by the support of these donors.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Araceli Gomez Saldana, host and reporter with WBEZ. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, the restaurants that make up Chicago a culinary destination are hungry to reopen, but owners say they're having a hard time finding staff. We'll talk about what's behind the dearth of restaurant workers, how local universities are handling societal topics within Latino studies programs. A Pilsen photographer captures pictures of his community as the neighborhood changes around them. We share his backstory.
It just has a really cool effect when you play loud.
And high school senior and bass trombonist Rafael Noriega toots his own horn in a musical profile. First off tonight, the restaurant industry took a beating in 2020. Here in Illinois, the leisure and hospitality sector lost more than 200,000 jobs last year, so the long-awaited reopening of Chicago's culinary hotspots should come as welcome news. But for the owners of those restaurants, finding the line cooks and servers they need has proven to be a tall order. Here to talk about the reasons behind those empty kitchens are Jaime De Paulo, President and CEO of the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Margarita Valenzuela Klein, Director of Member Organizing at the faith-based labor organization Arise Chicago. Jaime, we'll start with you. Are we seeing a shortage of low-wage workers, or is it simply a post-pandemic market adjustment?
I think that's a great question, and thank you so much. Yes, we are taking a big hit. Restaurants cannot serve full employees, serve the clients at full capacity. And yes, we're seeing a shortage of employees because with the pandemic, when restaurants were forced to close, the employees are either drawing unemployment benefits or they went ahead and found some other job. Yes.
Yeah, Margarita, are workers more hesitant to return to a low-wage job? And is it only about pay, or are we seeing other factors like childcare, health insurance? You know, what if they get sick? Is there paid leave? What are you seeing?
There are other factors. Wages is obviously one of the biggest one. The restaurant industry, in general pay minimum wage. The conditions of the places where people are going to work are very, very important in the decision. The safety regulations are a concern. The use of the PPE, for customers, and the protection that those workers need, in the workplace, also play a huge role on it. The possibility, if you get infected, to be paid for the quarantine time, it can be also a factor. The time off for people who can vaccinate, paid time off beyond what the city of Chicago or some suburbs in the Cook County may offer, may also play a factor. So it's a safety, wages mostly, and also other benefits that can be offered for these employees to come back.
It's true. Being safe is top of mind for most people. Jaime, are there any restaurants or any people that you have seen have success in finding employees? And when they simply offer them, is it basically offering better pay, or are there other options for your members?
Well, I've seen restaurants in the neighborhoods paying up to $25 an hour for line cooks, for example, and that's like way out of the box. Like Margarita was saying, they pay minimum wage those jobs, and paying $25 an hour, that's outside the box. But people are getting creative. I know restaurants, they need to get creative. For example, create an incentive program for the employees to bring some of their relatives to work with them. If it's a safe, good work, good place to work on, there shouldn't be a problem attracting good employees. So the employee can be the biggest advocate to bring other employees over. So create incentivize those employees. Like if the employee lasts 3 months, we'll give them an extra week pay or something like that. Think outside of the box, because at the end of the day, it's the survival of the restaurant.
Margarita, what do you think? $25 an hour, that's a lot. What do you think restaurant owners need to do to bring people back?
Well, if they are paying $25 an hour, believe me, that is not the norm in the restaurant industry, and I can understand with a line cook, but I'm not certain that is the level of wages that a waitress or a busboy or other people who help in the kitchen are making. There is the most provide more incentive, in terms of wages in the first place. And secondly, and I will really underline this, it's very important, the safety conditions. Many restaurants, and I'm not gonna generalize on this, but there are many restaurants who, are prioritizing on the customers. But the workers, I think, they are the most vulnerable group in this industry. What the industry is doing to incentive, even those workers to get vaccinated and provide, they pay for the aftercare if somebody shows symptoms after the vaccines, to stay at home, get well, get paid, and come back to work. So those things are also, incentives for these workers.
We did see communities of color being some of the hardest hit with the pandemic, and there were a lot of deaths in those communities. Jaime, back to you. Do you think there are legislative solutions to assist restaurants in finding some of these workers that they need?
Yeah, there's been talks with my members to actually approach federal government to create a special visa so we can bring foreigners to work on restaurants. And that's like thinking outside the box. Let me tell you, it has never been done before. They got special visas for people working in the agricultural field. So let's do that. I mean, if the restaurant cannot find employees, we got to start thinking, our legislators to be thinking of those things. It's frustrating sometimes when you have a great restaurant, they cannot serve, they can only serve 2 shifts because they cannot open in the dinner time because they don't have employees to serve them. And it's unfortunate when you go to a restaurant, you have to wait 10 more minutes for your plate. But people need to understand is not because the owner doesn't want to serve you, because this shorthanded in the kitchen, and you usually going to see the owner over there in the kitchen working on serving plates. And so we're doing the best we can and pushing our legislative representatives to do a special visa or help us out here. It'd be great. For example, another thing, if people are drawing on unemployment and getting the extra benefit, well, allow them to work part-time and don't punish them without the unemployment just for 3. Well, the economy adjusts, allow them to draw unemployment and also work. That will really help the restaurant industry.
And back to this idea of readjustment, Margarita, how many of the people that you work with have maybe retrained into other jobs or found jobs elsewhere? What have you seen?
Well, the restaurants were closed for quite a while at the beginning, or the personnel were reduced to the bare minimum to serve, customers. So many people were forced to find other jobs and to provide for their families. In many cases also, the concern about safety was one of the biggest, another big reason why, people did not went back to work to certain restaurants. Let me address just a little bit, what Jaime was saying in regard of providing a special visa for workers. I don't see how that can be a solution. The workers are here. Workers are here. The bottom line is how restaurants make it more attractive to go back to work instead of offering visas, a special visa for workers. Before the pandemic, restaurants did not have problem bringing workers along.
That's
and I
right.
think it was accustomed to the minimum wage salaries and in some cases not very good conditions. I think that the solution is to offer better salaries and to offer better conditions instead of
Thank you.
trying to bring workers along.
That's all the time we have today, and I want to thank you both. Thanks to Jaime De Paulo and Margarita Valenzuela Klein for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, addressing the pandemic and police brutality in the classroom. Stay with us. The pandemic has had a dramatic impact on nearly every facet of our lives, including higher education. Within university programs dedicated to Latino studies, the realities of COVID-19's disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities, as well as tensions surrounding police brutality, are finding their ways into classroom discussions and curriculum. Joining us now to discuss the programs at the respective universities are Geraldo Cadava, an associate professor of history and Latina and Latino studies at Northwestern University, and Ralph Cintron, professor and interim director of the Latino and Latin American Studies program at University of Illinois at Chicago. Geraldo, we'll start with you. How did COVID-19 impact your program, and was the adjustment to virtual learning, and how was the adjustment to virtual learning?
Well, I think it's impacted pretty much every facet of what we do. I mean, I think a major or a minor like Latina and Latino studies, we really rely on in-person contact to recruit majors and minors. I mean, I think there are very few Northwestern students who come to college knowing what Latina or Latino studies is. So the way they find their way into our program is by word of mouth, talking to friends who've taken our courses, joining student groups where some of the students are majors and minors already and tell their friends to take our classes. And so that's certainly led to a decrease in enrollments and declarations of majors and minors. It's been harder for us to reach students, for sure.
Ralph, what did you see as you were navigating the pandemic?
Well, everything that Geraldo just said, I would just simply add that the switch over, at the beginning of all of this, the crisis and so on, was just kind of incredible. All of a sudden, nobody had ever done this before. There was a whole question of equipment. For instance, did the students have sufficient hotspots, computers? All of that sort of stuff was very, very, very difficult. And then there was just the sheer labor. Everybody, both faculty and students, said, wow, this is just taking much, much more time than normal.
And Ralph,
and then everybody focused on the little screen. It just felt confining. There was a kind of loss of energy.
Yeah, and Ralph, your program at UIC is actually seeing an upcoming increase in enrollment. Did that surprise you? We've heard so many things about low enrollment.
Yes, it did. As far as I know, that's increased enrollment for the fall for 2021 and into spring 2022. But that's the entire population. I'm still trying to get the data in terms of what's happened with, say, the enrollment of Latina students.
Geraldo, were you worried about lack of enrollment, especially among students of color?
I mean, we're not really worried about lack of enrollment in the sense that, well, I mean, there are silly little things that are probably very uninteresting to your audience about, what happens with professors if their course is under enrolled. But, I think we just wanted to make sure that our students were feeling supported and that the program was doing what it could to support our students in a very difficult time. So, I mean, that has to do with FaceTime and contact hours. And so we were concerned about enrollment to that extent to make sure that our students knew that we were there for them and were supporting them. But just in terms of, the number of students taking our classes, I think we were less concerned about that. I mean, we always like having more students in our classes, but I'm pretty confident that next year when we're up and running in person again, they'll come back.
And Geraldo, going back to curriculum, how are you navigating discussing issues impacting the Latino community in your classroom?
Yeah, well, for sure, the past year has been really difficult for many Latinas and Latinos across the United States. So that has certainly come into the classroom. But I think, interestingly, I think there has been no shortage of events or circumstances in our world over the past 10, 20 years that has put Latinos front and center. So in many ways, I think our curriculum, our classes, our programming, we've always been really engaged with the communities around us and, national and international politics. So I think that's a kind of feature of Latina and Latino studies programs, and it's certainly taken a twist in this pandemic year.
Ralph, what about you? What are discussions like in your classrooms?
Yes, these discussions, once the BLM protests occurred in the summer, and into the fall, these were all part of the discussions. We certainly had a very hot discussions around the presidential elections this last year. Actually, Jerry participated in one of those discussions with us. I think the most notable thing in a particular class that I taught, I did ask my students to go into zip code data and find out, there was a lot of stuff in public health, Chicago public health, where you could download the number of deaths, literally, for census districts, zip codes and stuff like that. And we were able to match up those numbers alongside income, neighborhoods, again, according to the same zip codes, alongside property values. And that just really proved something to everybody. In other words, that death was hitting Latino communities quite hard, and problems with poverty, let's say, was hitting, the Latino students quite hard. So these sorts of data kinds of inquiries matched up. So in different kinds of classes, students would do different kinds of projects related to these sorts of things. But since I do a kind of urban planning stuff sometimes, that was something that we could do.
Thank you. And next time we'll talk about what you're looking forward to. We've run out of time today, but thank you to Geraldo Cadava and Ralph Cintron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a photographer in Pilsen using his art to bring attention to gentrification. Stay with us. Back in 2018, Forbes magazine named Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood one of the 12 coolest neighborhoods in the world. To many longtime residents of that rapidly gentrifying community, that was bad news, likely to bring even more development and displacement. One lifelong Pilsen resident is trying to have an impact on the changes he sees through photography. Jay Shevsky introduced us to Sebastián Hidalgo in July 2018. Here's another look.
My name is Sebastián Hidalgo. I am a visual journalist based out of Chicago. I grew up here in Pilsen.
Sebastián Hidalgo always carries his camera. Because he says he never knows what Pilsen will show him.
I was walking home. I came across this family that was playing in a fire hydrant, just like I was when I was younger. And this little girl, in the corner of my eye, I just saw her just floating in this nice little stream of fire hydrant water. And it's great, like those memories they're really special.
Pilsen holds a lot of memories for Hidalgo.
There was a sense of community, a sense of family, where you walk in those stores and the clerk was like, "Oh, you're the Hidalgo boy, how's your mom?" That's essentially gone.
For the last 3 years, Sebastián Hidalgo has photographed what he calls a culture under threat. Gentrification has changed Pilsen a lot in his lifetime. With a fellowship from City Bureau, a nonprofit that supports community journalism, his project is called The Quietest Form of Displacement in a Changing Barrio. Quiet, he says, because the impact is not just economic and not always visible.
I'm trying to bring awareness that with gentrification, there's also indirect displacement, which is the feeling of a home changing and being unrecognizable to the people who've called it home for generations.
Sebastián Hidalgo discovered photography when he was 12. He was in Mexico to visit his dying grandfather, and his uncle loaned him a camera.
He handed me the camera with essentially my first assignment, which was to document my family's mourning process. Watching my grandfather die, watching my family mourn and how it changed them, I just found meaning in it.
At 22, Hidalgo's Pilsen project was featured in the New York Times. Now, as a 23-year-old freelancer, he mostly documents life in Chicago's working class and low-income Black and Latino communities. And he doesn't claim to be objective.
It's really hard for me to essentially be neutral to things when ultimately the only way that I know how to create a photograph is to care. I care deeply about the people that I photograph.
Sebastián Hidalgo knows that Pilsen will never go back to being the neighborhood he remembers. But he says he hopes his photos can help the newcomers and the developers see his Pilsen and the people who were there first.
Consider them when you see them walking down the street. Consider them when you open up a new business here in the neighborhood. They've been here. They deserve a place where they can actually call home. Where they can work and provide for their families. Ultimately, that's what I want for Pilsen.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
After that story aired, Sebastián Hidalgo traveled to Salinas, California to document the town's affordable housing crisis. He's now back in Pilsen, continuing his work through the National Geographic Society's Exploration Grant. And you can see a slideshow of his work on our website. Earlier this year, Chicago Tonight met 4 student fellows with the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative, a program that helps students pursue careers in classical music. Here, Brooks College Prep senior Rafael Noriega shows off the singular sound of the bass trombone.
This instrument is called the bass trombone. The trombone in general, I just love the slide. You don't really have to press, valves or keys all the time, but instead you have this, this giant tube called the slide. I've been playing trombone, the standard trombone since 3rd grade, but I switched to bass trombone in 8th grade. In orchestra, there's only one bass trombone. And you're the only one, you're not sharing your part with anyone else. And when the moment comes with the bass trombone, you can just really lay the hammer down. You can play really loud and it'll be heard across the entire hall. The thing about music is that people always say practice makes perfect, but the way I see it, one is ever going to reach the level of perfection. There's always something we can all improve upon.
We'll be profiling 2 more student fellows in the weeks to come on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, so be sure to keep out an ear for that. And that's our show for this Saturday night, and join Brandis Friedman tomorrow night for Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Also, on Monday night at 8, join Brandis for our special Chicago Tonight Voices Community Conversation. She'll talk with community and thought leaders about the somber 1-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd, its impact on Chicago, and what a path forward may be. Again, that's Monday at 8 p.m. Visit WTTW.com/voices to RSVP. And you can catch me hosting weekend editions Saturdays and Sundays, as well as my reporting during the week on 91.5 WBEZ. Next week on Latino Voices, Alex Hernandez with Univision Chicago will be here in the host chair. Now, from all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Araceli Gomez Aldana. Thank you for sharing part of your week with us. Stay healthy and safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm serving Chicago for 37 years.